Lots of ways to do it. In fact, you know, 99%, 1% wasn't in the media a year ago. Now it's a routine discussion. People are thinking about things in a different way than they did before, just in the very few months of the Occupy movement. Actually, there's some polls on it, which maybe you've seen. There was I think, a Pew poll, which asked people, has been asking people at various times, what do you think about inequality? And concern over inequality shot up very fast after September, just from the effect of, I assume it's the effect of the Occupy movement, which has just permeated a lot of mainstream discourse. Now that can be co-opting too, you know, so sure, powerful systems will try to incorporate what they see as working and turn it to their own needs, whether it's human rights or you know, you name it. Of course, that's what they'll try to do. So, for example, after the 2008 election, which generated a lot of enthusiasm, there was right after the election, there was the annual conference of the Advertisers Association, whatever they call themselves. And every year they give a prize for the best marketing campaign of the year. And that year they gave it to Obama. He beat out Apple computers. And if you take a look at the business press right afterwards, which was interesting, they quoting you know, executives, CEOs, and so on. They're very excited about it. They said this is a new model for how we can behave to the public and in the boardroom and so on. We can use this model that worked so well at deluding people in the 2008 election. So sure, they not only ran it, but they learned lessons from it. The use of human rights is quite an interesting case, but it's true. Just, you know, like take, say, there was a huge anti-nuclear movement in the early 1980s. It was, you know, like 80, you know, huge demonstrations, millions of people try to get rid of nuclear weapons. And the Reagan administration cleverly co-opted it. They came out and said, yeah, great idea, we're all with you against nuclear weapons. Let's have Star Wars. That's how they got the Star Wars thing through, and they defused the movement. Made it sound as if it was opposed to nuclear weapons. Of course, we know it was, but of course they're going to do that. Can you change the discourse? Sure. I mean, I don't know what I mentioned about the meeting with Lula. I don't know if we were quoting from, but it was kind of interesting. So, for example, this was before he was elected, and he was quite popular. If you looked at opinion polls, he was highest in the opinion polls, but he never won an election. Mostly it was because they were of corruption. You know, the election was bought off. At the last minute, there's a huge flood of propaganda, you know, advertising and so on. But I asked him at one point, did he think he ever would be able to win an election if there wasn't corruption and so on? And he said he didn't think it would be possible. And the reason was, what he said is, I know the mentality of the peasants. That's what I come from. And when they go into the voting booth and they ask themselves, could somebody like me run a country? They'll say, no, it has to be one of those rich white guys. So even if they want me, they're going to vote for those other people. A couple of years later, he won. The mentality changed. And it's changed all over Latin America. Indigenous people, you know, poor people, it's just a radical change. So of course it can be done. And the kind of thing that he took me to see in the suburb, which you mentioned, is one of the ways in which it can be done. And there are plenty of others. I mean, in Bolivia, around the same time, about 10 years ago, the mobilization on the effort to privatize water led to a real revolution in the country. The first time, you know, hundreds of years that the indigenous population has been able to enter the political arena and take over political power. It's kind of interesting the way the governments are reacting. The governments and the corporations still want to privatize water, but they learned that the Bolivian method is dangerous because it led to practically a revolution. They threw out the big corporations and so on. So I was in southern Colombia recently visiting villages, and What the government of Colombia is apparently trying to do is to pick the villages off or the regions off one at a time. So if you come into some poor, remote, endangered villages and you give them a line about how great the water will be if we just buy your land up there where the virgin forest is, you can maybe get them to accept it. Although strikingly they're resisting, they're organizing and resisting. But these things, from the point of view of the rich and powerful, class war never stops. It's permanent. They're involved in a constant, bitter class war, very self-conscious. They want everybody else not to participate, but they're always taking part, carrying it out. That's why they're rich and powerful.